Thank you. I always want to do this before I start my official remarks this evening, but you know, we recognize a lot of people whenever we have an official function like this, but I always want to say, will everybody in the room just please stand up and be recognized? I won't do that to you though, because we have so many distinguished guests and police officers that are with us here this evening. You know, the Medal of Valor is steeped in tradition with the St. Paul Police Department. It is the highest award that the City of St. Paul and the St. Paul Police Department can bestow upon one of our officers. It's very important. I want to recognize the people that are here with us this evening that are past recipients of this distinguished award. Would you please stand and hold your applause until everybody is standing, and then we'll give them a round of applause. Will Commander Karsten Jeff Winger please stand? Jeff's here. Sergeant John Linson. Sergeant Mark Pierce. Sergeant John Pica. Officer Adam Bailey. Officer Brady Harrison. Officer Lyle Rust. Retired Sergeant Ken McIntosh. And could I have the family of Gerald Vick, my classmate and dear friend, also please stand. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you. Tonight we're going to recognize again one of our own, Officer David Longbehn. Dave's a good friend of mine. We grew up together. We actually went to St. Matthew's grade school together. We were altar boys together. Dave's the one that used to steal the wine, by the way. The nice thing is when you have the podium, you can say that. He has stories about me, I have stories about him, I love him, he's a good man. But I want to start with a quote. And I want you to remember this quote because I'm going to go back to it when we're done with this presentation this evening. And it goes like this, and it's from Arthur Ashe. True heroism is remarkably sober. It's very undramatic. It is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. I think you'll understand this quote much better when we're done here this evening. It's a difficult job being a St. Paul police officer or a police officer in general. And the story that you will hear tonight actually intertwines two police departments, the Maplewood Police Department and the St. Paul Police Department. It's a story about two individuals, about two fathers, about individuals that every day put on their uniform, go to work, not knowing what challenges they may face. It's like that for all the officers in this room. It's why I'm so fiercely protective and proud of what they do every single day. It's a difficult job. When they get up in the morning or before their shift in the evening, the officers that are patrolling the street today, hopefully they tell their loved ones, I love you, and I'll see you when I get home. But we all know that the difficult part about being a police officer is we never really know if we're going to come home at the end of our tour. This is a somber story, a very somber story. One of those officers, a Sergeant Joe Bergeron, got up, went to work. He was an exceptional sergeant for the Maplewood Police Department, and Joe didn't get to come home. He didn't get to come home, and we are very honored to have his family with us here this evening. Back in November, we dedicated a 30-ton memorial rock to Joe Bergeron, and I hope their family remembers that I said we will never forget, because we don't as police officers. We're so graced with so many retired police officers that are in our audience tonight. But I can tell you this, that every time, and this is more for the people that aren't police officers, we lose one of our own, and we've lost way too many over the last few years. We lose a piece of ourselves. We really do. It's a difficult job. So I ask you before I start my official comments that you do one thing when you go to sleep tonight. Say a prayer for those peacekeepers, because they truly are the heroes of God. Mayor Coleman talked about the premonition that Dave Longbehn had, and knowing Dave the way I do, we all have premonitions in law enforcement, kind of keeps us safe. Very strange day, he was working an off-duty job, and he hears about Joey Bergeron being killed on Bruce Ventle Trail. You know, Dave went home, got the rest of his gear, and he had an opportunity to talk to his son. And I know he did what I tell officers to do, because it's kind of a funny job. The funny part of it is, I always tell officers, try never to go to work when you're angry, and always tell your loved one that you love them before you go out the door. Now, having been married for 26 years, I can tell you that sometimes that's a struggle. And when I worked rotating days off, we'd save our fights for when I was off. That way I didn't have to worry about doing that. But it is very important, and Dave had that premonition. And he told his son that he loved him and that everything would be okay. Dave, will you come up on stage here with me? Thank you. Right before I read the citation here, I just want to thank and let everybody in the room know that on this tragic day, we work together very well as a group. We are ever, as I said, intertwined with the Maplewood Police Department. We've always been a good partner. We are very humbled and honored that all of you are here this evening, especially Chief Tamala. But these will be stories that officers, all of the officers, as you survive your career, that you will pass on to other officers, as many of the retirees and my former chiefs have done for us. They're the stories that make who we are. They're the stories you should never forget, ever, and always pass those on to the next generation. So I want to thank Maplewood and Ramsey County. You were all there that day. We all worked together to make sure that our cities are a safer place. And with that, I'll read the citation. On the morning of May 21st, 2010, Officer David Longbehn learned that Maplewood Sergeant Joseph Bergeron had just been killed while searching for 2 carjacking suspects. Officer Longbehn and his canine partner Cody, along with hundreds of other officers, rushed to the area and established a large perimeter in an attempt to capture these violent men. Officer Longbehn took up a post on the inside of the perimeter while other officers searched the area. Officer Longbehn had diligently held his perimeter position for hours when a man appeared carrying a heavy toolbox and talking on a cell phone. Officer Longbehn approached the man and asked for some identification. The man said he had none. Sensing that something was not right, David began to search the man for weapons. Suddenly, and without warning, the man attacked Officer Longbehn, striking him in the face with a heavy metal object wrapped in a piece of cloth. Officer Longbehn knew that he was now in the fight for his life with the man who was wanted for killing Sergeant Bergeron. Officer Longbehn was struck with such force that his radio was thrown from his belt, making it impossible for him to call for assistance. Although injured and under attack, Officer Longbehn remained clear-headed and recognized that if this man escaped, the citizens in the neighborhood and other officers would be in jeopardy. Officer Longbehn and the man fought to the ground. And that man, as you saw in the video, told David, "You're going to die today." He also tried to gain control of Officer Longbehn's gun. Blood from his facial injuries and sweat made it difficult to hold onto his gun, even with both hands. As he fought to keep his gun, Officer Longbehn had no way to press the bailout button that would have released his canine partner Cody from the squad car. As the struggle continued, there was a brief moment when a small space opened between Officer Longbehn and the man. Officer Longbehn pointed his gun at the man and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Officer Longbehn did not panic. Immediately and without hesitation, he put his gun back into service, then fired at and struck the suspect, ending the attack. Officer Longbehn did not hesitate to place himself in the path of the man who had taken the life of one officer and who most likely would have probably taken David's life and others as well. In doing so, Officer Longbehn found himself in a battle for his own life. His actions led to the capture of the suspect who had just murdered a police officer and ensured that no other officers or citizens would be hurt that day. Throughout this entire ordeal, Officer Longbehn remained clear-headed. He made the right decisions, and he took the proper actions. With skill, courage, and determination, Officer Longbehn fought, struggled, and prevailed in the fight of his life. I want to go back for 1 second. I told you it would all make sense. Arthur Ashe again. True heroism is remarkably sober and very undramatic. It is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. That's what Officer David Longbehn did. And with that, I am very honored to present him the department's Medal of Valor. Let's give David a round of applause.
I had to put some thoughts down on cards here. A couple years ago, we took a ride up to Brainerd, Minnesota, and I started to tell a story, and about 150 miles later, as we reached the north end of Mille Lacs, up in Garrison, Minnesota, my wife turned to me and she said, "You realize that you're still telling the same story." My kids have also said that if I talk too long, a big hook is going to come out and grab me and pull me off stage. So I put some words down. Thank you. I am honored and humbled beyond words to stand here before all of you and to receive this honor. A Marine sergeant explained to a young Marine who was preparing to face the enemy in combat for the first time. He told the young Marine, whether you like it or not, there's 3 rules of combat. Rule number 1, young men and women will die. Rule number 2 is you can't change rule number 1. Rule number 3 is somebody has to walk the point. May 1st, Joe walked that point. What started as a beautiful spring day ended in a senseless, unnecessary tragedy. Every police officer and police family worst nightmare came true. That day, Joe gave his life when he was brutally and cowardly ambushed by 2 evil beings. About 9:15 that day, my K-9 boss, Paul Dunham, called. He had explained what happened and asked if I was available to come in and search. I told him I was working an off-duty job. I'd let them know that I would be leaving immediately and that I would go home and pick up my K-9 partner, Cody, and I would report to the command post. As I was driving home to pick up Cody, I thought about the tragic events of August 26, 1994, and the eerie similarities from August 26 to May 1st. East Side, early morning ambush of Ronnie Ryan Jr. Tim Jones, a canine handler, on his day off, was called in to assist with the search. Tim and Canine Laser eventually found the suspect hiding on the east side in a fish house. The suspect shot and killed Tim and Canine Laser. As I was thinking about that, I started to get that sick feeling. It was at that point that the goosebumps started to come and the hair on my arm started to stand up. I heard what I believe was the voice of God. That voice said, "You will encounter a bad guy today, but you'll have a better outcome than in 1994. I never heard that voice before, nor have I heard it since. I reported to the command post and got my assignment. We had very limited and vague information, suspect descriptions. It was believed that the suspects were locked down on an inner perimeter. My assignment was a secondary perimeter at the intersection of Birmingham and Ivy. About 45 minutes onto my assignment, I saw a light-skinned black male walking down the street. Believing that the suspects were locked down in an inner perimeter, I knew I had to at least stop the male and get an ID from him. I called him over, and he complied. It was at that point that I noticed a neck tattoo. One of the descriptions given was a possible neck tattoo on one of the suspects. I had him place his hands on top of his head and turn away from me. I remember seeing a bulge in his right pocket, maybe a gun. I reached for my shoulder mic to call for help and additional squads, and that's when I got hit. I never saw it coming. Everything went completely black, and then a huge white flash of light. My radio flew off my belt from the impact of the blows. I knew I was in trouble. It felt like something had exploded into my face. I had no radio contact. I felt all alone out there. And nobody knew that I was fighting with a murderer. I pulled my gun, and I knew I had to fire at least one round, hoping that the cops in the perimeter would hear that, hoping that the neighbors would hear that and call 911. It was my call for help. The suspect continued to beat me with a steel construction bolt. Eventually, we fell to the ground, still getting beat in the face. The suspect, he turned to me and he said, "I'm going to kill you. You're going to die today." We fought over the gun, and I knew I was hurt, but I was still in the fight. It was at that point that my life flashed in front of my eyes. I saw my family. I saw North St. Paul Police Officer Richard Crittenton. And what I didn't realize is I had a whole bunch of guardian angels on my shoulder. I knew if I could stay in the fight and keep control of the gun, the momentum would turn. And when it did, I was able to get to my feet. I could barely see with my facial injuries. When I saw the suspect, I knew I had no choice. To survive, I had to shoot. I could not take much more of a beating and survive. At that point, I leveled my gun at him and pulled the trigger. The gun failed. It did not shoot. I remember distinctly hearing that click and realizing it just went from bad to worse. I then heard 3 times in my mind, tap and rack, clear that malfunction, try it again, and go to work. The weapon fired, and I was able to stop the suspect. The only reason that I believe I survived is that the suspect ditched the gun prior to trying to walk out of the perimeter. If he would have had that gun, there's no doubt he would have shot me and anybody else who tried to stop him. He had that plan. I want you to know that I did not do anything that any other police officer would not have done. I didn't do any of that fancy armbar with a twist and a double takedown. I stayed in the fight, and I took a beating, and I was able to keep control of my gun. And then I did what we were all trained to do. I want to say thank you to some very special people. First, to the good Lord for keeping me safe. To my family, my wife Ann, daughter Rosie, son Dave Jr., and my 2 moms, Mary Ann and Audrey. I want to say thank you to some incredible friends who have showed amazing kindness and generosity, not just to my family, but to our family here, our police family, and to members of this community. Mr. John Nassif and wife Helene. I don't know what to say. Amazing, kind, and wonderful. I love you guys. The Mancini family, Nick, Johnny, Pat, and family, 3 generations of Mancinis. Mo Sharif from the Downtowner, and Jimmy Theodora Kokakis, my Greek brother, my friend from the coffee cup. These guys took care of my family in the weeks to follow. They fed us, they sent food over. We had a policeman stationed outside our house for a week, 24/7. And that food went to those cops. And I say thank you. To Mayor Chris Coleman and wife Connie, thank you for your support, your friendship, your dedication to this community and to this police department. To Gail, Sam, and Allie, and all the Bergeron family, not a day goes by that you are not in my thoughts and prayers. We will always remember and honor Joe. To Chief Finney, Chief Harrington, and Chief Smith, thank you for your support to me and my family. Thank you for being our leaders, our mentors, and friends. I want to say thank you to the Maplewood Police Department. Thank you to the Mendota Heights Police Department for taking care of us the way you did. To members of this community, to those who sent kind wishes and thoughts, people that I had never met, I want to say thank you for the support. To the USPCA, Region 18, to the FOP, to Dave Titus and the Police Federation for kindness and support, for being on scene with me, from being there as I was in the bed at the hospital, the days that followed, and through the legal process that eventually came, and to Deb Ellis, a Federation attorney. To Randy Barnett, our range master, his dedication and passion, he teaches and he trains us to be proficient under all conditions, how to shoot and how to survive. Randy Barnett, your training saved my life. Thank you. To Police Chaplain Larry Lotzer, an original FTO of mine when I started in Richfield. Larry came over and took good care of my family. He took my son out when he needed to get out of the house and away from all the chaos. To one of my FTO's partners and friends, Kenny McIntosh. Thank you for taking me under your wing and teaching me to be a good policeman. I remember a little poster that was outside the old police gym of Lee Klein's office. It was a picture of a stork, and that stork had its mouth open like this. And the stork was swallowing a frog. And all that was left out of that frog was just his feet. And as that frog was being consumed by the stork, he was reaching out and choking the living crap out of that stork. And underneath, it said, "Never quit." Many words have been used to describe me and what I did that day. What I did is what every cop would have done. I never quit, I never gave up, and I stayed in the fight, and I relied on my training. To Dave Muller, a very special person, a very special friend. Dave has fought some of the toughest battles that life has, and he's won. He fought cancer, and he beat it. And Dave just had valve replacement on his heart, and he's at home. I wish he was here today. I know he does too. Dave took care of me at the hospital, and he took care of my family and me. He came over several times a day, and he kept me on the couch where I belong. And he kept ice bags on me to keep my eyes from swelling shut. He gave me third-degree frostbite, but my eyes never swelled shut. I also want to tell you about some of my heroes and those I respect and admire. The men and women in the armed services for keeping this country safe. The folks working up in the comm center. They keep us safe. They manage the chaos in our life that every day we face. My fellow street cops, the uniforms, the guys that go out there day in and day out. To the SWAT team, those guys do high-risk entries, high-risk operations. And I want to say a special thanks to Commander Tim Flynn and Sergeant Brad Hazlett. To my fellow K-9 handlers, when Mark Ficcadenny said, "You take that dog out of the car, you put that leash on him, he's going to lead you into harm's way." And last but not least, Joe Bergeron, you are my hero. I love you all very, very much. Thank you.